Okay, welcome back from spring break, and this will be our first lecture. You've had your exam already, and now we're going into early adulthood. As I talked about before in the last section with adolescence, there's a big issue with when does adolescence end and early adulthood begin, because technically you're supposed to enter early adulthood at 18. I mean, that's what the law says. Legally, you're an early adult at 18. But from an emotional standpoint, from a developmental standpoint, you enter early adulthood when you are independent, and that means independent financially and independent emotionally. So if your parents are still paying some of your bills, if you live at home, if they're paying your car insurance, your cell phone bill, then you're not financially completely independent. If you're going to them to make decisions, then again, you're not completely independent of your parents. And so that means that you're still in adolescence. But then again, you're really not dealing with the same issues that adolescents are dealing with. So many developmental people have decided that there's this new stage between adolescence and early adulthood. Some books are calling it youth, but your book, I believe, is calling it emerging adult. So whether you call it emerging adult or youth, it's the same thing, meaning that it's after adolescence, but before early adulthood. It usually starts around 18 and can go anywhere from 2 to 8 years, depending on the person, how long it lasts. Because as you know, we've come up with this, or the reason for this new stage is because of the extended education that we're expecting our young people to have. So if many of you, obviously, you're in college. And so because you're in college, you're not working full time, you can't support yourself, so then you're not independent financially of your parents. And then what that means is that you're not in adolescence, but you're not in early adulthood yet. So you've got this in between stage here that's going on. So most of the people that are in emerging adult are between the ages of 18 and, let's say, 25. They are often in college still. And for some of you, college will just take, 4 years. So maybe 22 you would be out, but many people again continue now to go to grad school. So that takes a few more years. And so it's just extending the period of emerging adult. Some people don't go to college, but maybe they enter an apprentice program. So they're learning to be a plumber or an electrician. They don't need to go to college for that. So they go to, become an apprentice and work under an electrician or a plumber, and they learn the trade, and that may take a few years. Some people do go out in the working field, but they're not making enough money to support themselves, especially living here in Southern California. It's very expensive. So they are still in emerging adult as well. So anyone who is done with adolescence, and what makes them different from adolescence is that they are not dealing with this sense of identity. Remember, with adolescence, a big part of their growth and what they were focused on was trying to figure out who they were, their identity, what they want to be when they grow up, all of those things, which adolescents are dealing with, but people in emerging adult are not dealing with. Um, let's see. So they tend to have this transition period, which college helps. So college helps with this transition period from being a child into becoming an adult. And because many people, when you're in college, you still kind of have the safety net of your parents, meaning that they're helping you financially. If you get yourself into trouble, they can help you out with that. But yet you're not dealing with those same identity issues. You're not under so much control of your parents because, you're on your own. Maybe you're living at school. Maybe you have your own apartment your parents are helping you with. And so you're dealing, with different issues. So it's kind of a nice transition period between, college helps between childhood and adulthood. Let's see. Many people in college, they do take on some debt, and so that can be a problem later on. But during college years, it's kind of a time of intellectual growth, personal growth. They're kind of questioning some of the things that they learned as children, maybe questioning some of the values of their parents, thinking for themselves, thinking differently, thinking on their own, trying to come up with, their own way of thinking, which is why a lot of colleges require now what's called critical thinking, so that people in this age group can learn to think for themselves, have their own ideas, new ideas, and feel the freedom to do that. Returning students, we do get many returning students in college. These are students who have been on their own, they reached adulthood, but they've decided to go back to school for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they just want to start a different career, sometimes they lose their job and they need to start a new career. They want to advance the career that they already have, and they need more education to do that. So there's a variety of reasons for students returning to college. Okay. So then when we finally leave emerging adult and we are now independent, most people have graduated from college. They have their first career job. So they can afford to live on their own. They've learned some new ways of thinking. They've been able to do their own problem solving and thinking. So now they are in early adulthood. So physically, early adulthood is a very healthy time. This is when most people reach their peak physically. This is why many athletes are in this age group, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, things that like doctors and lawyers have to go through, where you have to work, umpteen hours of internship and residency, and you're working all these hours, crazy hours, but you have to be able to think on your feet. And so in this age group, in early adulthood, they can do all of that. So early adulthood starts anywhere from 18 to 25 is the most typical. Sometimes people don't start until 25, and then it goes until age 40 to 45, depending on which theory you read. So it goes for a long period of time, and there's a lot going on during this age period. But in the beginning, again, it's when we reach our peak physically. There are some slight physical changes that occur, but it's more towards the end, more in your 30s, that those physical changes start to decline. In early part of early adulthood, car accidents are the highest cause of death, again, because this is a very healthy time for people. Um, the most important thing that influences our health at this age is socioeconomic status and education. And what that means is that people with higher education and who make more money are better at taking care of themselves. They're more likely to exercise. And many people in this age group get their exercise from organized sports. A lot of people are still playing on adult leagues of things, and they're getting organized sports in that way. Their education helps them to understand more about nutrition and the importance of staying healthy and doing whatever it can ever you can to stay healthy. So again, higher socioeconomic status, higher education. Usually, there's less stress. Although you are maybe you're in residency, or working at a big law firm, and you're having to, or the bottom of the list at your work, at your firm, your company. So you're working a lot of extra hours, but you can still understand the importance of taking care of yourself, so that you can, so that you're able to do those things. One of the biggest factors that affect this age group as far as their health goes is their weight. Because as we get older, especially after 25 and then throughout our adult years, our metabolism, or what's called our basal metabolic rate, decreases, which means that we do not burn off our calories as fast as we did when we were younger. So if you keep eating the same amount of calories, or eat the same way that you did in adolescence or the way that you did in college, and by the time you reach 25, if you keep eating that way and your metabolism slows down, so you're not burning off as many calories, you're going to gain weight. And that can be a problem at this age group. We find that today, 34% of US adults are obese, and 33% are overweight. Both of these are dangerous because as you move on in adulthood, your your metabolism just continues to slow down. And so if you don't do something different, if you don't exercise more to increase your metabolism and burn off those calories, or you don't change your eating habits and eat less calories, then you're going to lose weight, which can cause all kinds of problems, heart problems, diabetes, blood pressure problems. There's all kinds of problems that come with gaining weight. So, people at this age group need to definitely exercise. Exercise is the best way to lose weight and to keep it off. So, it's an important part of one's health at this point. And then, of course, eating right, eating the right foods, eating healthy, being more conscious of what you're eating is going to help to combat that gain in weight that one will occur if you don't take care. Now, exercise is also important for your emotional state. As far as stress goes, it decreases stress. We know that women, in one study, or several studies, have found that women who exercise walk, just a fast paced walk, so your heart rate is up there for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, reduce the risk of heart attack by one third. That's quite a bit. So it's important. And what you do as far as exercise go, what you do in your 20s shows up in your 30s. What you do in your 30s shows up in your 40s. So what you do now is going to help you later on. That's one of the drawbacks of exercise, is that we don't see instant results. We always want instant results. We want to feel good right now. And it may take a while for those results to show up. And so it's important to exercise now to help keep you in good health, not only now, but in the future as well. Another difference between early adulthood and adolescence is that with adolescents, they do a lot of risky behaviors. Remember, we talked about how the brain develops and that the frontal lobe is the last part to develop. Well, usually by 25, the frontal lobe is developed. And so it helps with our reasoning, problem solving, learning from our consequences. So in early adulthood, we're much less likely to engage in risky behaviors like driving fast and having unprotected sex and all those risky things that can cause us problems. We're much less likely to do that as we move into early adulthood because we're thinking more clearly and things are, we're learning from our consequences. Now, one of the biggest health risks or problems during this age group is infertility. This is when most people have their children because for women, remember we talked about that your peak of fertility is 27. So most women are having their children in their late 20s, early 30s. By 40s, it's extremely difficult to have a baby without any help, without any infertility help. And so this is the age group and when most people have their children. So again, then the problem is going to be when there's infertility problems. We know that one in five couples has infertility problems. 20% involve both the man and the woman. 20% of infertility or 40% of infertility problems involve just the woman, and 40% of infertility problems involve the man. And again, 20% of infertility problems either involve both or we don't really know. Sometimes somebody can't get pregnant and we don't really know why they can't get pregnant. It just kind of happens that way. So remember we looked at in the past the problems that cause the infertility problems for both men and women. For women, remember it's the blockage of the fallopian tubes. So we've got that's where conception takes place. Remember from way back when, beginning of the semester, we talked about conception takes place. It's when the egg and the sperm meet, and they meet in the fallopian tubes, and that's where fertilization takes place. So, if the fallopian tubes are blocked because the woman has endometriosis, can happen for a variety of reasons. The longer you wait to get pregnant, again, the more likely that those fallopian tubes will get blocked because every month when you have your cycle and you release your eggs, it releases mucus and other things into those fallopian tubes, and that can clog them up. Now, sometimes they can just go in and unclog the tubes with surgery. Sometimes they can't. Sometimes they use in vitro fertilization. Remember, if you don't remember, we'll go over it again. In vitro fertilization is when you take the egg out of the woman, and this is a surgical procedure. She has to take hormones to so that she will release many eggs, and they surgically remove them, put them in a petri dish. They take the sperm from the man, put them together in the petri dish. Conception occurs in the petri dish. They let it the zygote sit in the petri dish for several days, maybe a week. So, and the cell division starts to occur because remember that after conception in the fallopian tubes, the egg travels down the fallopian tubes, bounces around the uterus for about a week, and then it starts to implant. So it kind of does that instead in the petri dish. And then they insert it into the uterus so that it can implant into the uterine wall. And this is in vitro fertilization, which is the most common form of taking care of the most common form of infertility for women, which is blockage of the fallopian tubes. For men, the most common fertility problem for men, if you remember, is low sperm count or low mobility, meaning that they're not fast enough movers or fast enough swimmers because they have to go, they get inserted during intercourse into, the uterus, then they have to swim up to the fallopian tubes to gain access to the egg. So if a man has low sperm count or slow mobility, what they do is they have him come in, give a deposit of sperm. They freeze it. He comes in maybe a week later, another deposit of sperm, they freeze it. They may do this depending on his sperm count several times. Then they take all the frozen sperm, put it all together. So now the sperm count is very high. And then they insert it into the woman's uterus. Now they can go up past the cervix, up to the cervix, so that they don't even have to swim as far to get up into the fallopian tubes if they're a slow swimmer. So this is called artificial insemination. So artificial insemination is the most common way to deal with the man's most common infertility problem, which is low sperm count or slow mobility. So we've got these infertility problems. They happen in early adulthood. By the time you're 40, if you're having these problems, then obviously there's also other risk, as we talked about before, having children after a certain age, it also creates risk. So these are the main concerns physical concerns that people have in early adulthood that they have and that can occur. Other problems that relate to their health during this time period is cigarette smoking, of course, is bad for you. We've talked about this before. It's going down. Let's see, in 1965, 40% of adults smoked cigarettes in early adulthood. It's gone down drastically since then. Let me see. Most of the women and men who did smoke at this age, 90% of men and 85% of women started before the age of 21. So they start very early age. And then if you continue to do it through, your 20s and 30s, then of course it's going to affect your health later on. So the benefits, though, of quitting smoking are that your lungs can repair themselves. So the sooner you quit smoking, the sooner you can, your lungs can get better and things will be better. Okay, alcohol. Well, let's wait. Let me talk a minute about secondhand smoke. Secondhand smoke, of course, causes many health risks for everybody around you. The highest risk for secondhand smoke is for children, because with children, it affects their lungs. So they may have respiratory problems, asthma, things of that nature. In most divorce cases, again, it's almost always written in the divorce decree that if one parent smokes, that they will not smoke around the children. They won't smoke in the car. They won't smoke in the house. It's very commonly just written in because, excuse me, of the damage that secondhand smoke can cause. Another problem with this age group is drinking. Um, in college, many students drink. Often they become, it's socially acceptable. Many people turn 21 in college. Of course, as you know, many of you drink before 21. Where my daughter went to school in Texas, in kind of a small town. It was a college town, so most of the businesses depended on college students. And there was, of course, a couple of bars. And when you went into the bar, if you were under 21, you got one stamp, and if you were over 21, you got a different stamp. And so they checked IDs and checked for all that, but they allowed both over 21 and under 21 people into the bar. Now, the interesting part about this was that the bartenders did not really look at your stamp. So you could get a drink even though you had a stamp that said that you were under 21. And in her case, she was a cheerleader, and cheerleaders drank for free. So there's lots of drinking going on in most colleges. And most of the time, when we drink at this early age in college, we don't continue that type of drinking, that binge drinking, drinking enormous amounts. During, as when we get out of college. The unfortunate part about it is that, of course, some people become addicted at an early age, and then alcoholism does become a problem. So alcohol, again, can help with many things. Alcohol helps to relax people. It helps to calm us down. And it helps the blood flow and the oxygen to getting to our heart. So there's lots of benefits to drinking alcohol, but of course, there's lots of negative effects of drinking alcohol as well. Long-term use can lead to all kinds of health problems, cirrhosis of the liver, heart problems, strokes, all kinds of problems. It tends to run in families. Alcoholism, interestingly enough, is more common in cultures where alcohol is controlled and only for adults. In other words, in countries where, like maybe Germany or Italy, where you can drink at a younger age, it's not really controlled. It's not just set for adults. There's many, times adolescents. And definitely 18-year-olds are allowed to drink. They have a lower rate, interestingly enough, of alcoholism than we do in this country, where we have more controlled uh, of our alcohol consumption. Now, also interestingly enough, about alcohol, again, we have this binge drinking during college. It may lead to many problems. Even if you only drink, that heavily in college, people are often still getting DUIs, alcohol poisoning. Um, Alcohol poisoning, what happens is that when you drink an enormous amount of alcohol, most people's bodies shut down. You pass out because your body knows if you keep drinking like this, you're going to kill, you're going to die. And so the body is in its self preservation, trying to preserve itself, will say, okay, I don't want to die. I'm going to just shut down the system. I'm not going to let you put any more alcohol in me. I'm going to try to stop the alcohol poisoning from occurring. Some people don't have this mechanism, and so they just keep drinking and they will die of alcohol poisoning. The other unfortunate part about this is that if you drink an enormous amount and you pass out, especially if you drink it very quickly and you pass out so you can't get any more in you, the alcohol that's already in you sometimes is too much and you will die of alcohol poisoning. So if you have a friend that drinks too much and passes out, many people just dump them in their bed and walk away. Really, what you should do is stay with them for a few hours, make sure they're still breathing, try to wake them up intermittently to make sure that they're, can still gain conscious awareness, although they may have a blackout or not be aware of what happened, but at least they, if they do stop breathing or things get bad, you need to call 911, of course, and get them to the hospital. Um, most lower grades happen during college when people are drinking, unwanted sexual behavior, sexually transmitted diseases. And again, remember, alcoholism starts with social drinking. Nobody starts socially drinking and thinking, I'm going to become an alcoholic or I want to become an alcoholic. It just kind of happens because the tolerance builds up. So to get the same effect, they need to drink more and more alcohol. And so then they're drinking more and more, which again is leading to alcoholism. Now, interestingly enough, when you don't drink at all, that's not necessarily good at either. People who drink light to moderate have better health results. Again, we talked about, I said a few minutes ago, alcohol helps with the oxygen and the blood flow to your heart, and that can be helpful. It helps relax us, calm us. We all need a break from our stressors. So the question then becomes is how much is too much? When does alcohol become a problem? When do I go from being a light or moderate drinker to a heavy drinker? And if you're, some say, 7 drinks in 7 days. So if you have one glass, a drink a day, you're fine. If you have, three on, Thursday night and four on Saturday night, and you don't drink the rest of the week, you're fine. There's just kind of this fine line between when is too much. The other problem with it is it's not the same for men and women. Women metabolize alcohol faster. So you can take a woman and a man, exact same height and weight, exact same history of drinking, exact same family history of alcoholism, exact same amount of alcohol consumption, exact same amount of food consumption, and the woman will get drunk before the man. Her blood alcohol level will be higher than his because we have this enzyme in our stomach and we have greater fat contact than men. So alcohol gets in our system and raises our blood alcohol level quicker than it does for men. So it's very important to remember that. So light to moderate drinking is healthy. It's good. Studies have shown you'll live longer. Heavy drinking is not. It will cause all kinds of physiological damage. So you just need to, kind of be aware of this as you're drinking and how much you're drinking. And again, alcoholism always starts as social drinking. So you don't want it, definitely to get down to, to go down that road. Okay. Okay, moving into cognitive development. Cognitive development, remember Piaget was the theorist that we looked at, and Piaget's theories end in adolescence. He believed that formal operations was the last part of our cognitive development. And when we reached adolescence, we were done. But another theorist has suggested that we have another step beyond this, and they call it post formal thought. Post formal thought begins with generally begins in emerging adult, because as we're going to college and learning critical thinking is an important part of post formal thought. So not everybody reaches this post formal thought. It's believed it draws on our intuitions. It also draws on our emotions. um, it's one of the things, important part of post formal thought, is that we can see the gray. Many people think that everything is black and white, like, it's either right or wrong. There's no in between, there's no gray area. But people with post formal thought can see that there is a gray area sometimes. Things are not always black and white. It's not always just one way or the other, that there can be something different, or maybe there's a third option, to solve the problem. People with post formal thought recognize that in some cases, I can have my opinion and what I believe is right, and you can have your opinion and what you believe is right, and we can agree to disagree. We can agree that my way is right for me and your way is right for you, but there isn't just one correct answer for everything, as some people see that. So we can understand this, that other people can have a different opinion other than ours, and that that's okay. And even on really hot topics like abortion or gun control, things like that, where we can say, okay, I have my opinion, what I believe about abortion, but I understand that my opinion works for me. It doesn't mean it necessarily works for you, and you may have a different opinion. It doesn't mean I agree with it. It doesn't mean that you're going to agree with me, but I can accept the fact that we can have difference of opinion, and that that's okay, so that there aren't any necessarily one right answer, that everybody has their own opinion, and that's okay. Another thing that post formal thought people, the way they think, is that they consider the situational circumstances, meaning that you may behave one way in one circumstance, but you may behave a completely different way when the circumstances are different. So maybe you're a very passive person and you don't believe in violence. It's mostly that's how people would see that, that's who you are, that's your personality. But yet, if someone was attacking your child, you would attack them back. But that's caused by the circumstances, not necessarily who you are. So these are different ways that people with post formal thought, how they see things. And it's different than what Piaget thought was the end, which was formal operations. Another thing that we look at with intelligence is we know that intelligence, uh, what do I want to say? The results of intelligence tests, if we just look at intelligence testing, tends to decline with age. And how they first came up with this was that during, I believe it was World War II, what was happening was, a lot of people volunteering for service, wide variety of ages. So you had 18-year-olds volunteering for service, you had 30, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds volunteering for service. Everybody wanted to protect the country, especially after, we were attacked on our own land. So what the military usually does, is they give people kind of an intelligence test. The idea behind it is so they can place them in, proper places. Like if somebody's really good with math, maybe they're going to make them an engineer. If somebody's, good with biology, then, maybe they'll make them, a medic. Different things like that. So that was the idea behind it. So when they gave these intelligence tests to people in the military that were all volunteering, a variety of ages, they found that overall, the younger people, the people that were volunteering, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, did much better than the 40-year-olds. And so they came up with a hypothesis that with age, intelligence declines. So afterwards, when all was said and done, then other researchers started to look at this, to look at, does this really happen? What's going on here with our intelligence? And so they looked at, you remember, with intelligence testing, we talked a little bit about it. Some of the items in the intelligence test are timed, and the faster that you can come up with the answer, the better score you get. So when they took this out of the intelligence tests for elderly people, they did much better. So, yes, people as we get older, our reaction times slow down. It takes us longer to come up with an answer, but we come up with the right answer. So, they divided then intelligence by age into two different types of intelligence: fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is solving new problems without any previous experience or knowledge. The thinking is flexible, it's adaptive, it's independent of education. So, of course, young people are much better at fluid intelligence. They don't, when they're trying to solve a problem, they don't have all this previous experience to sort through to come up with a conclusion. They just solve the problem. And so they come up with answers much more quickly. It's called fluid intelligence. It flows very easily. The other type of intelligence is crystallized intelligence. Think of how long it takes to form a crystal. It takes a long time. So, crystallized intelligence is much more common and is much better in later adulthood. Because as you get older, you have more life experiences. So, when you come to solve a problem, you go back on all that old life experience before you come up with a conclusion to the problem. And so, therefore, it takes you longer to come up with a solution. So, crystallized intelligence is more common with the elderly. The older you get, the more your crystallized intelligence gets stronger. Fluid intelligence is more common with people that are younger. But it doesn't mean that your intelligence change declines with age, unless of course you get some sort of medical problem like dementia, and we'll talk about that later when we get into late adulthood. But it just is a slower reaction time, and that can affect the results on an intelligence test. Okay, so that covers early adulthood, physical and cognitive. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, remember all this information. Most of this information is in the book, and if you have any questions, concerns, you can always email me, call me, or text me.